They thought beating her would break her. A mother, bloodied but unbowed, clutched her son's hand as they were cast into the streets. No home. No hope. Only the sound of her child's cry to keep her going. But fate watches quietly, and sometimes, it intervenes. He saw them, a millionaire with a past, and a heart not yet hardened. They said she brought shame to their family. All she brought was love, for the wrong man, perhaps, but with the purest heart. When her husband passed, her in-laws turned on her like wolves. In their eyes, she was no longer a wife, just a burden. One rainy evening, after weeks of verbal abuse and bruises hidden beneath long sleeves, they dragged her and her young son out of the house with nothing but the clothes on their backs. She wandered the streets with her boy, shielding him from the cold and hunger the best she could. Every door she knocked on closed quickly. Friends turned their backs. Hope, like warmth, began to vanish. Then came the stranger. He was a man used to the cold boardrooms, cold meals, cold nights in a mansion with no laughter. A self-made millionaire who had forgotten what it felt like to care. But when he saw the woman cradling her son under a flickering streetlight, something stirred. A memory of a mother he lost. A kindness he once knew. He offered them food. Then shelter. Then safety. But this isn't a tale of rescue, it's a story of rising. She didn't just survive. She rebuilt. With dignity, she took nothing for free, working quietly in the background of the man's empire until her own strength began to shine. And he? He rediscovered warmth in her resilience, and in the light her son brought into his world. From shadows, they came. But together, they built a shelter, one not just made of walls, but of trust, healing, and second chances. Meera never asked for much, just a roof to protect her son, a little respect, and a chance to live with dignity. But after her husband's sudden death, even those simple hopes were torn from her grasp. Her in-laws, once cordial, turned cruel. They blamed her for everything, the misfortune, the debts, the silence in their once lively home. What began as cold shoulders turned to harsh words, then to fists. Still, Meera stayed. Not out of weakness, but for her son. She swallowed her pain, her pride, and her tears, just to give him one more day of stability. But the day they struck her while her son watched wide-eyed and trembling, something broke. Not her spirit, but her silence. With her child clinging to her waist, she walked out of that house with no money, no support, and nowhere to go. But she carried something stronger than all of that, her dignity. Days passed with no shelter, nights under bus stops and park benches. Her son, hungry and confused, kept asking when they would go home. Meera had no answer, only a quiet promise whispered through chattering lips, "We will rise." It was on one such night that fate shifted. A wealthy businessman, used to ignoring the poor, noticed them while sitting in his car. Something about the woman's eyes, tired yet fierce, made him pause. Against habit and reason, he offered help. But Meera didn't want pity, she wanted a chance. And when given even a sliver of it, she proved unstoppable. This is not just a story of hardship. It is the journey of a woman who lost everything but refused to lose herself. This is a mother's fight for dignity. Meera had always been the quiet one, the one who put everyone else first. Even when life became a series of endless struggles, she never complained. She had learned long ago that survival wasn't about asking for help, it was about enduring, for the sake of her son. But after the death of her husband, everything changed. Her in-laws, once a support system, became strangers, cold, calculating, and cruel. They blamed her for his passing, accusing her of being a burden. And when they grew tired of her, they forced her out. Without a home, without a dime, Meera was left to face the world alone. She could feel the sting of judgment from passers-by as she held her son close, their silent whispers louder than any words. Days passed without a proper meal, without a safe place to sleep. But still, she fought, her heart swelling with love for the child who didn't understand why the world had turned against them. Her hope seemed to fade with each passing night, but her will was unbroken. Then, on a cold evening, a chance encounter changed everything. A man, wealthy beyond measure but as emotionally distant as anyone could be, saw them huddled under the glow of a streetlight. Something in the woman's eyes stopped him. Her exhaustion was visible, but so was her strength. She wasn't asking for pity, she was simply surviving, trying to protect the one thing she loved most. With a kind gesture, he offered help. Not just charity, but a genuine desire to make a difference. It wasn't just money or a roof that saved Meera, it was the kindness that reminded her there was still good in the world. And that kindness gave her the strength to rebuild, for herself and for her son. Meera never imagined her life could fall apart so quickly. One moment she was a wife and mother, trying to hold her family together. The next, she was a widow blamed, beaten, and thrown out by the very people who had once called her daughter. Her in-laws saw her as nothing more than a burden now, and without hesitation, they cast her and her young son into the streets. She wandered aimlessly, clutching his tiny hand as the world passed them by. No one stopped. No one cared. She was invisible, just another forgotten face in a city that moved too fast. Hunger gnawed at their stomachs, but fear gripped her even more tightly. How would she protect him now? How would she go on? Then came the stranger. He didn't look like a savior, dressed in a tailored suit, stepping out of a luxury car. He looked like someone from a different world. And he was. A world of power, money, and distance from suffering. But something about Meera and her son stopped him in his tracks. He could have kept walking. He almost did. Instead, he offered his coat. Then a meal. Then a place to stay, just for the night, he said. But one night turned into a second chance. This stranger, unknown, unexpected, saw in her not a burden, but a woman with quiet strength. And as their lives slowly intertwined, something began to change. In her, he rediscovered compassion. In him, she found the stability and dignity she had been denied. He didn't fix her life. He didn't erase the pain. But he stood beside her as she rose again. Because sometimes, the person who changes everything is a stranger you never saw coming. Meera had known loss, but nothing prepared her for the storm that followed her husband's death. Left alone with a young son, she thought her in-laws would offer comfort. Instead, they offered cruelty. They treated her like an outsider in her own home, accusing, blaming, pushing her to the edges of their lives until the day they shoved her out completely. With no money, no shelter, and a child to protect, Meera found herself on the streets, cold, hungry, and afraid. But she never let her son see her tears. To him, she smiled, told stories, and whispered promises that better days would come. Even when hope flickered like a dying flame, she held on. Because that's what mothers do, they endure. They rise. She took odd jobs, swept floors, sold flowers by the roadside. Anything to buy her son a warm meal. Each day, she grew a little stronger, a little bolder. People who once looked past her began to notice her determination. One such person was the owner of a small cafe, who offered her stable work after seeing her dedication. It wasn't charity, it was a recognition of strength. From there, Meera slowly rebuilt her life. Her son went to school. They moved into a small rented room. She took night classes, learned new skills, and saved every rupee with care. She rose, not with grand gestures, but through quiet courage and relentless will. The world had tried to silence her, to crush her spirit. But Meera refused to stay down. She was not just a victim. She was not just a widow. She was a mother. And this is her rise, not to fame or fortune, but to dignity, self-respect, and the kind of strength that shapes generations. Meera never thought she'd become invisible to the people she once called family. After her husband's sudden death, the home she shared with his relatives turned cold. Whispers behind closed doors turned into insults hurled in broad daylight. She was blamed for his death, accused of bringing misfortune, and eventually, treated like a burden no one wanted to carry. Then one day, without warning, they threw her out, her and her little boy, with nothing but a tattered bag and a bruised heart. It was as if she never mattered. As if her love, loyalty, and years of quiet sacrifice meant nothing. She was thrown away, discarded like broken furniture. The world outside was no kinder. Doors remained shut, faces turned away, and hunger grew louder than hope. Yet through it all, she held on for her son, who looked up at her with trust, believing she'd make things right. And she tried. Day after day, she searched for work, for shelter, for something to hold on to. Sleep came beneath bus stops. Meals, if any, came from charity. But her spirit, though shaken, refused to die. Then, one evening, everything changed. A stranger stopped. Not out of pity, but because he saw something in her no one else did: strength. A mother who hadn't given up. A woman with fire in her eyes, despite the dirt on her clothes. He offered help, not to rescue her, but to give her the chance she needed to rescue herself. And she did. Meera rose from that broken place, step by step. She built a life of dignity, stability, and peace. She was once thrown away. But in the most unexpected moment, she was found by kindness, by hope, and most of all, by herself.